She walked into the courthouse like any other day. But minutes later, her silver coils lay scattered across a cold tile floor, cut, stripped, and laughed at by the very people sworn to uphold justice. They thought she was just another black woman. They thought wrong. Because within moments, they'd be standing before her, trembling. Before we dive into this unforgettable story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Trust me, you won't want to look away. The sun had barely crested the Charleston skyline when Celeste Monroe stepped out of her silver Buick, the morning air still heavy with dew. Spanish moss draped like ghostly whispers from the old trees, and the courthouse steps rose before her like a relic of both law and legacy. Her navy blazer was crisp, her posture collected. But what she carried wasn't just a portfolio. It was history, identity, and a quiet, unwavering power she never felt the need to announce. She chose not to wear her judicial robe in public. Not out of modesty but intent. She wanted to walk into courtrooms as a woman first, not a title. But that morning, as her heels tapped softly against the stone, the halls of justice did not echo back respect. They responded with suspicion. At the security checkpoint, everything shifted. Deputy Hank Riker stood like a gatekeeper of some old order, arms crossed, authority radiating from the creases of his uniform. His eyes scanned her, silver coils neatly twisted, no badge in sight, just calm confidence, and that alone was enough to provoke him. "Ma'am, step aside," he said, his voice thick with condescension. Celeste barely blinked. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't answer. Just stared. Her badge, once produced, gleamed under the overhead lights, but he didn't look at it. He slid it into his pocket like a gum wrapper. Something about her presence gnawed at him. Maybe it was the way she stood tall. Maybe it was how she didn't flinch. "You in a rush, sweetheart?" The word landed sharp, a weapon in disguise. Celeste's calm didn't break. But as Riker gripped her arm and pulled her from the line, as the quiet buzz of the courthouse was replaced with the cold hum of a windowless room, something inside her began to coil tight. The room was still. Sterile. A steel chair sat like an execution post. Clippers on the table whispered the threat before he even spoke it. "I don't consent to this," she said clearly, her voice measured. But Riker wasn't listening. He was performing. For himself. For the system that had always let him get away with it. And so, without warrant, without cause, without shame, he cut her. Not her skin, but her hair. Her dignity. Her roots. Thick, silver strands fell to the floor, one by one. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. But inside, the silence cracked. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't see beyond their bias, was that Celeste Monroe wasn't just walking into court that day. She was about to take the bench. And the reckoning had already begun. The hallway outside the screening room was dim, the kind of silence that didn't comfort, it accused. Celeste walked slowly, her badge now back in hand, her steps even but heavy with something deeper than humiliation. Fury didn't show on her face, it lived beneath the surface, simmering under her skin like coals waiting for breath. Her silver hair, once proud and coiled with years of memory, now lay scattered on a cold tile floor. But she kept walking. Not because she had something to prove, because she had work to do. She passed clerks who saw the aftermath on her scalp and quickly looked away. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Maybe they were scared. Or maybe they were used to pretending silence was safer than justice. But that morning wasn't just any hearing. The courtroom buzzed with attention. Press, protesters, attorneys packed into rows. The case was about police misconduct, a hearing that had already drawn national scrutiny. And yet, as she stood outside those heavy double doors, no one inside knew that the judge they were waiting for had just been brutalized in her own courthouse. Celeste paused, steadied herself, then pushed the doors open. A hush fell instantly. Heels on marble echoed like thunder in a storm. Rows of eyes turned, some confused, some shocked, some instantly ashamed. Because they recognized her. Not just as the woman they'd seen pulled away earlier, but now, as the figure who walked with a quiet authority that could only mean one thing. She was the judge. And the courtroom, this sacred space, had failed her before she even sat down. She made her way to the bench slowly, deliberately, and took her seat. No one helped her into her robe. She didn't need help. The fabric settled on her shoulders like armor, and her voice, when she spoke, was calm, controlled. "Is the docket ready?" The clerk nodded, her own voice trembling. "Yes, Your Honor." Celeste looked out across the courtroom, at the officers, the defense, the public, and said nothing more than the words needed to begin. "The case of United States versus Charleston Police Department," she said. "Charges of abuse of power, excessive force, and civil rights violations." Her tone made it clear. This was no longer just about a case. This was about the rot hiding beneath the marble. And then, across the room, she saw him, Deputy Hank Riker, still standing by the door. His posture stiff, face pale, like the ghost of control he used to be. Their eyes met. She didn't blink. He did. Because for the first time, Riker understood exactly what kind of woman he had laid hands on that morning. Not a victim. A judge. And the courtroom wasn't just in session now. It was on fire. Court moved forward with a mechanical rhythm. Motions, testimony, objections. But beneath the surface, everyone was watching her. Even when they looked away, they watched. Celeste listened to the first witness, a man in uniform who had shoved an elderly protester to the ground. She nodded. She took notes. She asked nothing yet. But Riker? He couldn't stop moving. From the corner of her eye, she watched him. His shoulders twitched, his hands fidgeted at his belt. He kept glancing at the exit, like he was rehearsing his escape in real time. Because he knew. Deep down in the marrow of his bones, he knew the walls were closing in. The second witness spoke of abuse, of power wielded without accountability. Celeste let the words sit in the air like smoke in a cathedral. Then she called a recess. Everyone stood. Some left quickly. Others lingered. But Riker stayed. Maybe he thought he still had a role to play. Maybe he believed silence would save him again. He was wrong. When the room was nearly empty, Celeste finally looked at him. Really looked. "Deputy Riker," she said, her voice sharp as a broken blade. He froze mid-step. Turned. Stepped forward. His jaw clenched. "Your Honor." Now. He obeyed. Not because of her tone, but because of the weight behind it. The courtroom had been his kingdom for too long. But now the Queen was seated, and she was asking questions. "State your full name for the record." "Hank Riker," he muttered. "How long have you served in this courthouse?" 14 years. Celeste tapped her pen once, then twice. Her gaze locked on him. "And in those 14 years, how many women have you escorted into that screening room?" Silence. "How many complaints have been filed against you?" His voice cracked. "I don't know." She leaned forward, not raising her voice, but sharpening it. 12. 12 formal complaints. All buried. All dismissed. The courtroom silence thickened into something you could feel in your throat. "You didn't know who I was," Celeste said. "And that's the problem. You didn't care. You saw a black woman, and you decided she was yours to humiliate." Riker's mouth moved, but no words came out. "And now," she continued, standing slowly, "you're no longer the question. You're the evidence." She turned to the officers at the back of the courtroom. "Escort Deputy Riker into custody. Separate holding. Formal charges to follow." "No, wait. Riker's voice cracked as the cuffs clicked. But it was too late. The courtroom didn't clap. It didn't cheer. It bore witness. Because what just happened wasn't spectacle. It was justice. And the reckoning had only just begun. When the doors closed behind Deputy Riker, the courtroom exhaled. But not with relief. The air buzzed with something else now. A shift. An unspoken understanding that justice had stopped being theoretical and stepped into the room in heels, with a shaved scalp, and a voice that wouldn't tremble. Celeste remained standing behind the bench for a moment longer, her fingers laced over the wooden edge. Then she sat, slowly, deliberately, like she was reclaiming not just the seat, but the ground itself. "We'll resume with the next witness," she said. And so they did. One by one, the stories came. Not all were loud. Some arrived in the form of documents. Others were whispered through testimony that cracked halfway through. A father who watched his son suffocated on a sidewalk. a former clerk who had seen complaints vanish from the file room. And then, Denise. Celeste recognized her instantly. Denise Talley had worked records for years. Quiet, reliable, invisible to most, but not to Celeste. And not today. Denise adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. I filed complaints. I logged others. But they went missing. Missing? The prosecutor asked. Marked resolved. Deleted. Buried. By whom? Denise hesitated. Then she said it, Judge Taryn Mahoney. It was like someone cracked the ceiling. The man who had mentored Celeste, ushered her into the federal bench, who told her she was what the system needed, was the very person who had spent years protecting its worst instincts. Celeste didn't move. Didn't blink. Because part of her had known. Maybe not the details, but the silence. The way Mahoney always changed the subject when Riker's name came up. The way order was always prioritized over truth. And now the lie was on the record. Celeste called a recess. When she rose this time, she didn't look back. She walked with her head bare and her robe still clinging to her like armor made of fire. In her chambers, a thick manila envelope waited on her desk. No name, no note. Just placed there by someone who knew it was time. Inside, 12 complaints. Real. Papered. Stamped. All signed by Mahoney. All ignored. And at the bottom of the stack, a memo. Riker may be rough around the edges, but he keeps the halls in order. Especially with certain groups. Celeste's fingers curled the page until it crumpled. There it was, the truth, not in a whisper but in writing. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. She simply stood. And when her clerk entered to inform her that the Senate Judiciary Committee was requesting a statement on the matter, Celeste didn't flinch. Good, she said. Bring in the attorneys. All of them. We're finishing this today. Because silence had been the rule for too long, and she was done following rules that protected power instead of people. The final hearing began not with fanfare, but with rain. Not the gentle kind that washes the world clean. It was the kind that falls hard like a reckoning. Streets flooded. Reporters huddled under umbrellas. Protesters stood shoulder to shoulder on the courthouse steps. No one was moving. No one was leaving. Inside, Celeste walked to the bench without her robe. She folded it gently across the back of her chair. Then she looked out, not as a judge this time, but as a woman whose dignity had been violated and who refused to disappear because of it. I've worn this robe for years, she said, voice calm and low. But for too long I stayed silent. Not anymore. No one stirred. Even the ceiling fans seemed to pause. This court finds Deputy Hank Riker guilty of abuse of power, civil rights violations, and obstruction. But it doesn't stop there. She raised a single folder for all to see. This is the Monroe Mandate. She explained what it meant. Comprehensive anti-bias training, psychological screening, routine evaluations, and zero tolerance for discrimination in any federal courthouse under her jurisdiction. She vowed to take it further, to the circuit, to the Senate if needed. This was never about revenge, she said, scanning the room. It's about responsibility. And this time, no one gets to hide. Then came the most unexpected moment of all. From the back of the courtroom, a man stood. Gray hair, trembling voice. Your Honor, I was arrested here in 2011 by Riker. I filed a complaint, and they told me I tripped. But I didn't. He slammed me into a wall. Celeste nodded. Was a complaint filed? Yes. I filed it myself. They buried it. Thank you, she said. Anyone else? Hands went up. One. Then another. Then dozens. It wasn't just testimony anymore. It was truth, finally breaking through after years of silence. When the final name was recorded, Celeste gavelled the court one last time. Court is adjourned. But outside, the movement was only beginning. In the months that followed, the Monroe Mandate spread. Other judges adopted it. Cities called about it. A bill was drafted. A system had been cracked open, and light was finally pouring in. Celeste didn't stop working. She presided over cases, wrote policies, mentored students. But she walked differently now. Not with arrogance, but with presence. full and unshrinking. One afternoon, she visited a middle school. A girl in the back raised her hand and asked, "Do you still believe in the system?" Celeste paused, then smiled. "I don't believe in what it was, but I believe in what it can become, because of people like you asking that question." She left with tears in her eyes, not from grief, but from hope. Because in a world still learning how to see women like her, still struggling to hear voices like hers, Celeste Monroe had become something bigger than a judge. She had become a beginning.